You know that sickening hollow pit in your stomach when they cancel at the last minute after promising they'd be there? The heavy silence after the explosion feels physically suffocating, like your heart is being squeezed in a vice. But then, just a few hours later, the apology text hits. Maybe it's poetic perfection, or they just show up at your door with coffee. Suddenly, the anger evaporates, and your brain goes haywire. You think, this is it, this time it's real, and you let them back in instantly. You aren't weak or crazy. You are trapped in a biological thriller that feels like love, but behaves exactly like a chemical addiction. This is trauma bonding, a psychological trap where your brain is hijacked by a volatile cycle of abuse and rescue. You aren't hanging on for the highs anymore. You are physically chasing the urgent snowflake of validation that follows the pain. It creates a chaotic roller coaster that keeps you running back to the very person who threw you off the edge, desperate to find the relief that makes the misery feel manageable. Imagine falling in love with a dangerous gamble that costs your self-worth, or perhaps you're simply addicted to an emotional roller coaster that has no safety rails. That, in a nutshell, is trauma bonding. It is a powerful, unhealthy psychological response where you form a deep, obsessive attachment to someone who treats you poorly. The secret sauce here isn't just abusive behavior. It is the agonizing rhythm of the cycle known as intermittent reinforcement. Think of it like a slot machine, where you pulled a lever for a big dopamine hit, but then lose everything the next day, leaving you desperate for the next big win. Your brain craves those unpredictable highs so desperately that the inevitable lows feel essential to keep you on the hook. Psychologists explain this as a chemical addiction in the brain, triggered by sharp cycles of devaluation followed by sudden validation. You aren't in love with who they really are, because you are actually addicted to the chaos of the cycle itself, a dangerous trap that keeps you running back for more. Let's break down the hot and cold cycle, which is essentially a biological roller coaster designed to hijack your brain chemistry. Imagine diving into a deep, underwater trench. At first it feels like paradise when they flood you with love bombing, making you feel like the most special person alive. That intense validation releases a massive flood of oxytocin and dopamine. But then abruptly, the lights go out. They become cold, critical, or withdrawn. Your brain enters a state of panic, experiencing withdrawal symptoms because it suddenly doesn't have access to those chemicals anymore. Then, they resurface with a sweet apology. The machine clicks into place again. They promise change, and you feel a wave of relief wash over you. It triggers that same chemical high, tricking you into forgiving the abuse. You start rationalizing the toxicity, convinced this time will be different. You aren't falling in love. You are chemically dependent on the volatility, trapped in a loop where the pain of the withdrawal is the only thing that reminds you they are still there. Think about that volatile relationship that feels like a chemical addiction, a place where you constantly oscillate between absolute euphoria and soul-crushing panic. You think you are falling in love, but really, your brain has hijacked itself. Picture your body weaponized on cortisol, the stress hormone that keeps you in a constant state of survival mode. But the moment the chaos pauses, they pull you close and offer that brief reprieve. Your brain releases a massive surge of dopamine to reward you. You interpret this chaotic chemical cocktail as love, but you are actually chasing a biochemical high. This creates a powerful feedback loop where your mind urgently demands the next high just to survive the withdrawal. When they pull away, your body doesn't just feel lonely. It enters full-blown chemical withdrawal. You aren't loyal to their character. You are addicted to the relief of the crash. You crave the very danger that is weakening you. Have you ever wondered why you stay tied to a relationship that feels like it's slowly tearing you apart? It's rarely about selfless love. It's about the seductive grip of the savior complex. Deep down, there's a cruel illusion that says, if I am just lovable enough, I can heal their broken soul. It's a power trip wrapped in masochism, because walking away feels like failing a sacred mission, and frankly, hitting rock bottom is preferable to the paralyzing fear of inevitable abandonment. It hijacks your primal instincts, making you believe you are the only one who can fix them. You become terrified that if you ever show your true self, they will leave. So you stay trapped in the chaos, trading your peace for their drama. But you aren't actually fixing them. You're just another casualty of their cycle. So exactly how does this dangerous cocktail hijack your brain? Let's break down the science. Do you find yourself constantly checking your phone, heart pounding every time you hear ding, waiting hours or even days for a reply to your text? That visceral anxiety isn't just bad luck. It's a textbook sign of trauma bonding, where you've become physically addicted to the volatile highs and lows of an unpredictable partner. You might also find yourself walking on eggshells, terrified that a minor slip-up will trigger their emotional explosion, simply to avoid being blamed. Meanwhile, you are like prioritizing their erratic needs over your own mental health, sacrificing your schedule to keep their peace so you don't have to face their anger. You might even be reading into their every subtle text to decipher your status in their life. Psychologists point out that this cycle creates a struggle between your head and your heart, confusing fear with love. If you recognize these patterns in your relationships, you aren't weak. You're simply caught in a cycle of trauma that rewires your brain, making it harder to break free. We often mistake the adrenaline-fueled drama of a toxic dynamic for deep passion, but psychologists Jennifer Freyd and John Suler identified a sharp distinction between what we crave and what is actually happening. Real love acts like a sturdy, slow-burning fire. It provides warmth, security, and a sense of belonging that doesn't flicker out. Narcissistic supply, on the other hand, is exactly like refined sugar or a high-caffeine hit. It's flashy, instant, and feels incredible, but it leaves your body chemically starving for more. When a narcissist interacts with you, it's rarely about star you star. It's exclusively about their need for an audience to validate their grandiosity. You aren't being loved. You are being consumed as a trophy to boost their ego. True intimacy requires the vulnerability to show your cracks, whereas narcissistic supply demands you perform perfection. You think you are building a connection, but you are actually caught in the trap of intermittent reinforcement, where the highs and lows keep your brain on a chemical roller coaster and physically unable to let go. You know that specific adrenaline rush you get when you think, I bet I can prove them wrong? That riding the bull backwards feeling that makes your chest tight? That is the rejection paradox in action, and it turns your love life into a high-stakes video game. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, but let's be real, it's just emotional gambling. You spent months pouring your heart into a person who pulled the plug on affection like it was a disposable switch. That abrupt withdrawal isn't a rejection, it's a challenge. Your brain stops seeing pain and notices a tantalizing gap where value used to be. You start viewing their cruelty, not as betrayal, but as a winding obstacle to be overcome. The absence creates a vacuum that suddenly makes the validation feel like legendary loot. You stop blaming them for the trauma and start obsessing over the challenge. It gamifies your misery, convincing you that the cost of chasing them is worth the temporary high of the win. You have to realize that what you feel isn't romance. It's a physiological withdrawal that mimics addiction. Think of trauma bonding like trying to detox from caffeine, except your latte is a toxic text message, and the crash leaves you crying on the bathroom floor. To break this cycle, you need to implement a brutal, necessary detachment protocol. Stop scrambling for their validation like a rat in a maze that's already learned. The reward is a lie. Instead, become the calm observer of your own pain. When they pull the rug out, don't chase them, but don't lie on the floor. Rebuild your self-worth brick by brick. You have to admit that staying feels like dying, so you finally grab the scissors, cut the wire, and reclaim the vitality that no abuser knows how to value. Walking away feels like a massive victory, but the real victory is learning how to quiet the inner storm that constantly lingers. Even after cutting the cord, you might feel like a compass spinning wildly in the wind, addicted to the adrenaline spikes, because your nervous system was tricked into believing that chaos equals excitement. To truly rebuild self-worth, you must stop being a victim of your past and start treating yourself with the fierce, radical compassion you'd offer a wounded child. This isn't a finishing line. It's a slow crawl to rewire your brain. Yet psychological research proves we can definitely shatter the cycle of trauma bonding by consistently choosing safety over stress. You need to stop replaying the what-ifs, like a broken VHS tape, and start enacting boundaries that act as sturdy armor. It feels like scrubbing hard grime off a dirty diamond, a laborious process that ultimately reveals a brilliance you never knew was there. You have to realize that your worth isn't a vacuum. It doesn't disappear when someone leaves, but rather a solid foundation you built yourself. When you finally own that truth, healthy love will stop feeling like a gamble and start feeling like a promise. It is absolutely vital to understand that trauma bonding functions like a physical addiction because your brain has been chemically rewired to crave the devastating highs and lows, trapping you in a psychological maze that feels impossible to escape from. Those moments of intense validation are actually a vicious bait-and-switch mechanism that teaches your system to expect pain as the price of relief. But the ultimate catalyst for change is realizing you are not a victim of your brain chemistry, but the author of your own healing. You possess the resilience to unlearn these toxic patterns, daring to demand a life defined by stability rather than panic and choosing yourself every single day. Don't let the fear of the empty space keep you chained to the wreckage of the past. This channel is here to offer you the roadmap to reclaiming your autonomy. If you are ready to finally break the cycle and actively prioritize your peace, hit subscribe and let's start this journey toward total freedom together and begin building a future where you are free to thrive.